So thank you everyone for joining us today for our webinar on Japanese maple pruning. Our speaker today is Elizabeth Ruiz. She's a wonderful gardener and person who knows so much about pruning, has done many of our classes all about different kinds of trees. And today we have Japanese maples. So I'm very excited to hear what she has to say, and I'm going to pass it on over to her. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Taylor. So the way I organize the seminar is we're going to talk a little bit about the essence of the maples, and then do a little bit of pruning, have some question, Q&A, and then we talk a little bit of pruning, and then we do the second section, which is spring pruning. For maples. I put it here just to give you an idea on how I organize my maple pruning for the year. So let's start with so if you guys are looking for me, you can go to gowithnature.net, and you will find my email and my phone number and anything. I do have to say that this year I'm full for the winter pruning, but I could answer questions or look at your tree and put you maybe for fall, because it's the season that I get people in for the next year. So the essence of the maples. So one of the things that we do look in the maples is what are the characteristics, why we like them. So we have the leaves are really delicate, the colors are beautiful, they are a little bit translucent. So we usually have to be aware of, if they get too much sun or if they are too shaded. So, for example, for the red color maples, if you put it in a really full shade, they have the tendency to don't be so sharp in the red. For the greens, the light greens, or the variegata, the maple, the butterfly maple, the example that I have here, with the pink and beige, those are a little bit more delicate from the sun and the wind. So the thinner the leaves, the more delicate they are. Especially maples don't like wind, so we have to be aware of that. So the leaves also, one of the essence of the maples is the color in the spring and the color in fall. A lot of the times we don't fully get the fall color in some sections, like for example, in Berkeley, in Oakland, we don't get a lot of that fall color, like intense fall color. We do get the spring. Some of them have that starting in spring, opening up with really vivid color, and they become a little bit more pale or more dull when they are fully grown, established, the leaves itself. So, but the fall, sometimes we don't have that contrast with temperature. We don't get the fall colors, but it's also an essence of the tree. How do I pass? So then the other thing that I try to be like really try to show people and make people understand that is part of the culture of the Japanese maples and the Japanese gardens, is how, like for example, beautiful they look. Like for example, the branch movement. Some of them, they have the twisting and curling, and I want to emphasize that. That's why I try to look at the maple, see the kind that you have, and emphasize the personality or the essence of that specific maple. So branch movements is something that a lot of the weeping maples do have. We have that winter silhouette. That means when they are naked, you do want to see that silhouette, and you want to see the branches, and you want to see that movement in the trunks. And the other thing is the horizontal branching. The horizontal branching is really well known. Most of the people like maples because of that horizontal branching. They do have different, the horizontal branching is developed in different ways for certain maples. Not all of them, like the weeping maples, some of them, they don't have a really horizontal branching per se because they are weeping down. But most of the maples, they do. Like the coral bark maples, you will see that have the horizontal branching. The red blood, like you have in that picture, also had that horizontal branching. So the essence of the maples, the thing that I want people to understand is when you look at the essence of the plant, you want to emphasize that with your pruning. So that is the importance. The other thing that I had tried to make people mindful is actually pick the right tree for the space. Because even though we're talking about maples, maples do have different growth habits. That means how naturally they will grow, and different heights. And even though I do prune maples and I do try to contain them, sometimes it's really hard to keep a maple small if the place is not the right size for it to develop. So I always try to, when my clients ask me where will be the maple to pick up from here, so I will try to see what is the space that they have and what is the growth habit that we want, and then I will go and pick up the maple. So the right space is important. Even though you can keep it small, it will be good that, like if you are going to have 3 feet, don't pick up a coral bark maple that grows to be 30 feet tall. So that type of situation. The growth habit is how naturally they will grow. So in this case, for example, we have the round shape. That is the red maple. With the horizontal branching, they naturally had that round shape on them. So I try to emphasize it. How open I made it is up to my client and the needs in the garden. But the round shape is like most of the regular maples, the green maples, are the round shaped maples. The more in the shade that they are, the more open that they are, that they will develop. The V shape is more like the coral barks maples, that they have that growth that go up and out, and that arrows will show how the branching and the structure, the main scaffolds, the main trunks, how they will develop. So in that case of making this around the tree, is going to be a little bit more difficult, just because usually they end up having a lot of more top growth and be heavy in the head and skinny at the bottom. So you wanted to realize that this is the way that they will grow, and know how to develop those lower branches. So you can generate those lower branches. You can generate the horizontal branches in the lower branches, but not in the upper sections as much. And there will be really little horizontal branches versus the round shape. And then the other one that is also kind of like super classic of maples, and that is, I think, one of the maples that are really different from a lot of trees, is the cascading, the dome shape maples. So the branches actually do cascade down, and there is one called the waterfall. Is green and it grows really strong. Believe me, it can be like 10 feet tall, but it will develop really strong branches going down. So these personalities in these maples are really, really hard to change. So that is when I try to highlight that. Try to pick up the right growth habit for your maple. At the beginning, when they are younger, most of them kind of like grow a little bit higher, like have that shooting up. more than when they get older. No matter which one they are, they have a lot of that shooting up. But with time, they start kind of like developing whatever growth habit the natural growth habit they have. So in this case, with my pruning, that is when I start kind of like, okay, if I have a round shape and I am developing my horizontal branching, that is when I go and try to emphasize what the tree is, not trying to change the tree. So I'm gonna go right there with the pruning. So the pruning, I think that the one thing that we wanna keep in mind is our pruning cuts. Maples are kind of like susceptible to the pruning in the sense that they react really strong if they are pruned really hard. And you start losing a lot of that growth habit that they have. So pretty much they start generating a lot of shoots and not so much that branching, but it's like one shoot and all crazy. And so we wanted to do, I want to give you steps on different pruning cuts that will help you to reduce your tree or to control your tree or to make it more beautiful without going overboard with over pruning your tree. So when you are doing pruning cuts, and I don't want to go too much into vocabulary for you to learn it, but more to understand. So when I am doing cuts, I have cuts that I do a lot. I always say to people, cut to something, because that helps the tree to heal, that helps the tree for the reaction when you are just cutting without knowing, well, this branch is too big, I'm just gonna cut it here, and you just cut it. It doesn't matter where. You are not actually training your tree to do what you want. You are actually kind of like really harming the tree. So all trees had certain sensibilities and certain mechanisms that they use to overcome the pruning that we do. So when you do good cuts, you are helping your tree. You are actually training your tree and helping it to recover. So when I say cut to something, it's because wherever you cut to a bud, to a branch, or to the trunk, all of them are going to have a reaction, and all of them are going to be able to heal themselves if all of the cuts, if they are done properly. So when you cut to the bud, you want to cut to the bud only in the year, in the last year growth or the current year growth. So what do I mean? So whatever pruning we are going to do now, we're going to be doing it in the last year growth. All the growth that is there, they did it last year, 2023. So that is the one time that I'm going to cut to a bud. And I am only going to cut to the bud in the last little bits at the tips of the tips of the branches. I am not going to cut to a bud really close to the trunk or anything like that, because the reaction is going to be really strong. So when you are cutting to a bud, you want to cut, it doesn't matter how close you cut to the bud. So I put the little signs where I am cutting in there, in these branches to demonstrate where it will cut. And I am not doing it too close, because sometimes you cut too close and the bud will not develop. Because it gets too cold or we have frost. So it helps to leave a little bit, whatever it is, a quarter, inch or half if you are not too sure. And then later on I come and clean those cuts. So this cutting the tips in the last year growth, current year growth, let's say that I'm cutting in the spring, so it will be current year growth. That cutting is called tipping. So I'm just cutting the tips. I can cut 3 or 4 buds, or I can go even lower and I actually leave just 2-3 buds. So it all totally depends on you. You just don't, the stronger that you cut in that length, the stronger the reaction is gonna be. So if you are trying to control your tree and having those really long shoots, and you go really deep in your cut and just leave one bud, one pair of buds, So when you are doing is you are actually encouraging that strong growth again. So, but so in this drawing, what it shows, even though it's this alternate and maples are not alternating buds, what it's showing is like, for example, in this, this line shows that we're gonna cut 3 buds. So the reaction is small, and so I usually do that for branches that are getting really leggy and not branching out. So I go and tip the tips, cut really quick, just to make them branch out and not keep growing longer. So in the, and also in this picture, what I am trying to show you is when I have all these shoots going up, I try to cut them at different lengths. So I don't go all of them at the same point, like, oh, I'm gonna leave 3 or I'm gonna cut 3 buds in every branch, because then I'm gonna do flat branches. So what I do is I cut some taller, I cut some smaller, the stronger ones, maybe I go a little bit lower, so they catch up with the thinner ones, and like that I'm able to kind of like make different reactions, because remember, the lower I go, the stronger the reaction. So if they are really thin branches and I go really deep, and I have 2 next to it that are really thick, so then my reaction is the reaction of the pruning is going to be different. That thin cut, that thin branch that I cut really deep, may not come back, or maybe just grow really small because the strongest ones took over. I left them higher. So it's all about high and low, and how they relate to each other. The other cuts that we do is when we are cutting to a branch. So those are cuts that I do like at the top when I'm thinning out the tops, when I have too many shoots going up. So I need to thin out some of those. So instead of having 3, 5 branches over there, or 5 branches over there, I'm gonna leave 3 or 2 branches according with how much I can prune, or I have. So in this case, for example, cutting to something is cutting to a branch. So in this drawing over here, you can see how you can reduce the length of the branch by cutting one of the main sections to another branch. So and this, what it does is help that wound callus, because it has a supporting branch that is growing right at that point, and it helps that to heal the wound. Also, it gives you that directionality. So you are actually telling the branch, telling the tree, okay, this section I need you to become more dominant, and you're gonna go that way and not the other way. So in this case, in the drawing example, maybe I'm saying, okay, go to the left instead of the right. And I am also reducing in length. So those are the things that I try to keep in mind. So when I am trying to prune, I also keep in mind how thick that branch is. So I work with to stop having strong reactions. I try to cut 2 branches that are kind of close together, close in size. So if I am reducing something that is, I am cutting 2 half or smaller or the same size or close to that section. You know, I don't go to be a quarter smaller or less of what I'm cutting, because the reaction is going to be stronger. So in this case, for example, in the drawing, you see that the cut that I did remove a branch that is the same size in thickness to the one that I'm leaving. So the reaction in this cut is going to be a little bit softer. Maybe it will have one little shoot and one strong shoot, and that will be it. So it's easy to control. Even though I am reducing it, I am also kind of like slowing down with the pruning. If I go and do, for example, in the picture, when I have that do not, because I have that red line across, it's like I have a really thick branch and I'm cutting to a really thin branch. So even the angle of the cut is okay, what the problem of this this picture is showing is that the little branch is too little. So it's way in thickness, is way smaller in thickness than the branch I'm cutting. So this is gonna make really strong shoots in that point, and it's gonna look kind of crazy. And also it could be that it's so small that that branch that I cut too, the one that I left, is just gonna die on me because it was too much of a cut. So with maples, I try to go, it's kind of like thinking training, like go as little bits at the times, and then I am able to control and make the tree look how I want it. In these two pictures over here, in the thinning, what I am trying to do is removing how crowded it is at the top of the branch, or maybe, you know, like it's like to cut the strength of those sections. So I try to look for that thickness and I say, okay, which one in the location of the branch, how I can thin out. So cutting that in the middle give me the perfect space to for having branches still, but not necessarily making it loud-sided or anything. So it is really important that when you select, you always cut to something, and that you think in the directionality of the branches you are leaving. So try to focus in the branches you are leaving and not so much in the branches you are cutting. And then you can see how your pruning is going. So then the pruning cuts. So for example, this is when you're cutting to the trunk. So we went through cutting to the bud, cutting to the branch or a branchlet, and now we're cutting to the trunk. So, or a main stem, which is pretty much the same thing. So the first thing that you wanna look, and in this case, I put a picture here that is really good, the picture in the left side, I put a collar. So when you are cutting to the trunk, you want it to cut right above the collar. So in this case, I'm cutting this branch, and you can see my shears, and I'm cutting right above the collar. The collar in this maple, it shows really well because it has these brown wrinkles. Some of them actually, the green, I think most of the maples show that wrinkleish, but some of them actually has a little bit more of the bulkiness in the collar. So the collar is that section that has those brown wrinkles between the branch and the branchlet, the main stem of the branch and the branchlet, or the trunk and the branch. So that's intersection points. That is where the collar is. And the collar is important because those have special cells that help the tree to heal. So in this example, I am showing you where the collar is and where I will cut with my shears, right above the collar. You want to leave the collar, you do not want to cut the collar. So in here, in the same picture, I am showing you, for example, in that blue or cyan circles, is showing cuts that they were done correctly, and the tree has already wall off. It's called wall off because they generate layer by layer, by layer by layer, they start covering those wounds. So those two are showing you that those wounds were cut right above the collar and they were able to heal. So in the left side is the example that show you, okay, you are cutting the main stem. So you are not gonna have a collar because the collars are in the intersections. When you are cutting the main stem, that tree is just growing, or that branch is just growing right up straight. So how do you do good cuts? So you go with the angle of the branch that you are leaving. So in this case, these two circles, are showing you, for example, that I cut the main stem, but my angles is what is helping the tree to heal. So they don't have the collar there, but they are gonna wall off. This walling off takes up to 5 years. depending on how thick these branches are. So if these branches are like a thumb thick, so a dime thick, it will take, 5 to 6 years for them to wall off. So that's why sometimes you don't want to do 2 and 3 cuts right next to each other, because that will stress the branch. So usually I do 1 or 2 cuts and then I move to another branch and let that branch rest. And that also stops with the strong reactions. So in this case, for example, we have this one at the top. It has a little bit of the angle, and the angle is dictated by the 2 branches. So pretty much my upper and my lower section in my cut is dictated by where that branch starts and where the other one starts. So that is how I connect it. This lower section over here, so it was a branch that I had, and I had 2 branches, which coral bark maples do that a lot. They produce a lot of shoots in one point. And I am always trying to look for 1 branch in every point. I don't want to have 2 or 3 branches. So I had to cut one. So in this case, the lower circle is showing you how that angle goes. The angle went with the trunk, with the part of the branch that I left. So it starts at the beginning of that definition, those lines, but it's going with the angle of the branch I'm leaving. So this is the branch I left, and I cut it right there. So it is really important for you to do that the best that you can. Sometimes it's really difficult to do good cuts, but if you can, do them, because that is going to help the tree to wall off. Open wounds actually are literally open wounds for the tree, and they are not able to, they are putting energy on walling off, and they are putting energy on protecting those cuts. In the same picture in the right, you can see that little branch growing right at that point, and I didn't remove it. And the one reasons why sometimes I leave one of them, I don't leave all of the ones that they grow from there, but I leave one sometimes when the cuts are kind of like big, and because those little branches will help that wound develop the donut, is what we call that walling off. Those little branches actually help for that healing process to happen. So the directionality, we're gonna cut. If we don't have a collar, we go with the directionality of the branch we're leaving, and or cutting to. And if we have a collar, we're gonna cut right above the collar. So the last one of the good cuts is when you are cutting a really, really heavy branch. So in this case, you wanna be able to remove the weight of the branch before you do the last cut. You don't wanna rip off the bark like in the picture here in the right, where you have good cuts and the big one that just rip off. That is one of the things about, like raining conditions and it's wet and the branches just break and rip off some of the bark. We not only rip off the collar, but also make the wound longer and bigger. So it is really important that when we have big branches to cut, so then you can do this jump cut you cut the first cut is the one in the bottom. So you go and start cutting with your saw or with your saw or chainsaw, and then you cut a little bit, and then when the branches start biting into your saw, so that means that it's time to start doing the second cut. The second cut is going to be in the outer section of the first cut, not in the inside. So when they break with that indentation. And then when that branch is all clear and everything, then you're gonna do your third cut, which is, you see, you have your collar. Sometimes in some trees you have that bump in there. It actually looks like a bump, and you feel that you are leaving a lot of branch, but what you are leaving is the collar. So you just do your third cut and cut right above the collar. And that is for every single tree in the world. So the winter, so how do I do my pruning for maples? I do two prunings. Usually I do winter pruning and I do spring pruning. So the winter pruning, people always ask me, when specific is winter pruning? So, because we have microclimates, I will say winter pruning is according when your tree has lost all their leaves. So that is dormancy, and that is when I want to do my winter pruning. So in winter, the trees are not dead, they are dormant, but they are doing things. They have root growth. So you have a tree that has been a struggle for a year or two, whatever, is struggling. Like winter is actually a really good time to put fertilizer for root growth. And I will talk about it in the product section. But right now, for example, with trees that were struggling, with trees that had, like, for example, one of my clients had to cut a section because they had to change a pipe and blah, blah, blah. So then I went and did a little bit of fertilizing for the roots, not necessarily for the growth of the tree. So it's the best time to plant and transplant maples. It's actually the only time I would suggest people to do it, unless that you are buying your plant, or you have your plant in a pot, you are putting in the soil, so you can plant anytime. But transplanting, meaning you are moving your tree from a spot and putting it in another spot in your garden, this winter pruning, when they are fully dormant, is the best time to do it. Cold weather doesn't affect them as much as heat and sun when you are doing transplanting. And in dry winters, I will say we do have to water our trees. And I put this here. We don't have dry winters. We have not had dry winters for 2 years, which I'm really excited. But I do have to say that I am still seeing maples struggling from those dry winters we had. So it takes them a long time to get back to being healthy, normal, or strong, wherever 3 of those are the cases. But it is really important that in winter, if we are having dry winters and it's sunny and it's nice and we are going for bike rides and stuff like that, and it's not raining, that you at least, if it's established tree, you put at least once a month water, deep watering once a month, meaning maybe 5 gallons, 10 gallons of water, depending on the size of your tree. But just deep watering your trees once a month will help your tree to do not suffer from the dry winters. And then if it's new tree, new planted or transplanted tree, you do want to put water. You want to have that soil moist for 2 reasons. One, when your soil is moist, if it becomes cold, the moist in the soil protects the root system from getting frozen. And then the other thing is because remember that the roots, the stimulation that they need for to develop is water. It's not sun, but it's water. The top section is sun, but the lower section is water. So having moist root systems when you transplant is really important. So what do we do in winter? Winter is my favorite pruning time. The trees are naked, so it's easy to see, it's easy to read the tree, it's less hassle because there is less mess. But it's also, it's really a good time, a good connection, because you are actually kind of like working in the main structure of the tree. So the pruning in winter can be done from December to February. I actually do from December to March because like I go from, Walnut Creek to San Francisco. San Francisco, I'm doing my March pruning because they are the ones that the leaves start developing or opening up the latest in the season. I have also in Marine, in some of the protected areas, those are the maples that start developing the latest. So, you have any time between December and February. What is going to happen is if you cut in December, so fine and everything, if you cut in like right now, January, February, with all the rain, when you do your cut, your trees are gonna be called bleed. Is the sap is gonna come out and they're gonna look like they are crying. But it's okay. That doesn't affect the tree. That means that there is a lot of water going on, and that sap is gonna stop. Sometimes it can take like a day to stop, but it will stop and it doesn't hurt the tree at all. That is the only difference. In December also, like when it's really cold and you are cutting, if your shears are not sharp, it will split the wood. Maples do that a lot. So you want to make sure that you are, if you have the right tools for the job, meaning if you are doing big cuts and maybe your shears are not the perfect tool for that, so go with the saw, because the shears had that pressure point and that can split the wood if you are like forcing the shears to cut something that is too big. You have a pruning budget, and I do wanted to emphasize and explain what that pruning budget is, but emphasize it because even though we're doing winter pruning, like remember that whatever you do with your tree is gonna react in spring. So if you do cut a lot and you are trying to reduce your tree a lot, in spring your tree is going to grow twice or 3 times more. So that is what the budget is all about. And if you can get a hold of how to understand the budget, it will be great. Usually what I explain to people is when you're cutting, put the branches close together in the floor and see how much do you have, and see and look at your tree and compare how much branches you have in the floor and how many branches you have in your tree. And if you are getting close to half and half, so you're cutting too much, and what you are gonna get is a lot of reaction. So that is why with the maples I do 2 times pruning a year, and if I have to, I do 3 times, but it's better to do little and more often than a one big pruning cut and then let it be. So that is what the pruning budget is all about. You want to cut 25%, maximum 30% of your tree, like at the pruning time. So like winter pruning, you do 25. In spring pruning, you do 25. It's not like fruit trees that sometimes people think, oh, well, it's winter, we cut a lot because it's the only time of the year we're gonna cut. It's not like that. So you want to try to cut a little bit and pace yourself. Like if you actually prune your tree every year, you are able to control it. And it's way better for the tree because you are actually being able to train your tree to do what you want. So what do we do in winter pruning? I talk about structural work. And what I mean is, if I need to cut a big branch, I am going to cut it right now in winter, because it's gonna make the tree react, and it's the best time to do these cuts. If I come and cut it in spring, the plant may just get shocked and start shooting way more than if I cut it in winter. So also the energy of that branch is gonna go into the tree to develop the tree itself. So a structural work, all the big cuts, if you have to cut big branches, this is the time. If you have to, I'm not saying cut the big branches right now. I'm saying if you have to cut a big branch, this is the time right now. The tree is dormant, so it helps it helps the tree when it's dormant, when you do the big cuts. So in winter, the reduction, I do a lot of the reduction right now. So I go and reduce the tree to the height I want, and then I go in spring and reduce and opening up a little bit more. So reduction, if you are controlling the height of your tree, so you have winter and spring to do that reduction. So I start right now. And then thinning. I do a lot of the thinning of the branches. I don't go in working the little bits, the little branches, but I do a lot of the work in the overall tree to thin it out, because it's gonna, because I wanna generate that winter silhouette. So I do work in all of that. I try to do 25% of my pruning budget. So I don't do a structural 25, reduction 25, and thinning 25. No, all these three things are 25. That is why this 25 is so important. Because remember, if you do one too many cuts, let's say that I'm cutting a branch and I go 1, 2, and 3, and I have 3 wounds right next to each other, that the tree is gonna feel that has like a main wound. So I am weakening that point, and that point is going to have a lot of problems healing. But instead, if I go and say, well, you know what, I'm going to cut the one in the middle, and I wait next year or 2 years and I cut this one. So then, and I leave these 2 branches next to the wounds, that helps the tree to heal and the reaction as well. So it's all about slowing down. Remember that you have pruning seasons, different seasons to prune, and that pruning budget. So here it is, my winter silhouette. So I'm gonna go right to left. So in these two, it's like cases where, yes, I am dealing with trees planted in crowded places where I have a gate and I have a window and I have a roof, and like the tree is so close to the house. I'm not working about ideal conditions. I'm dealing with the normal, what to do with this tree. So in that case, I still want my winter silhouette, and what I mean is I want my branches to look natural. In here is a coral bark maple. The second tree is a coral bark maple being at the entry. So you can see that there is a little entry and in the left side, and the tree is right in front of the window, but you can still see that tree naturally growing. And I have been pruning this tree for like since 2012, and it still looks natural. Meaning it goes from thick to thin, and it has little branches at the end. I don't want to have my winter silhouette looking like this stub, really thick branches. So that is the picture at the left with these stubs and knobs and all that. That is gonna make your tree look chopped. And those, again, you can see how the maple itself is having like some dieback, and it doesn't look natural. It doesn't look beautiful. So, and it makes the tree react really strong as well. So you don't want to have those type of cuts. So how do I do in winter? In winter, the first thing I want you to do is, when you do your winter pruning, is you're gonna look at your tree. You're gonna get anything. You're gonna do first cuts. You're gonna do is cut your 3Ds: the dead, the disease, and the damage. For color bark maples, it's really easy to know what is dead because it's kind of like dark. For the other trees, it's really difficult. So what you're gonna do, and I'm gonna show you when I get out of the sharing the screen, you are gonna peel a little bit the cambium, and if it's green, it's alive, but you wanna cut all the dead, disease, and damage. So like that is out of the way, and also it's gonna help you reading how healthy and how happy your tree is. If you cut all that and you have your 25% in the floor and your 75 up in the tree, so that means yeah, your tree is a little bit in the weaker side because it's a lot of dead. So that is one of the reasons why you want to cut the 3Ds, because it is just going to help you right away figure it out the health of your tree and remove all these things that are gonna, you don't want to cut the good one to realize that you cut to a dead branch. So anything that is damaged, meaning, well, with the wind, something fell on it and it kind of rip it off a little bit, but it's still holding in there. It's just better to cut that, do a good cut and remove it, because that is an open wound. And diseases are gonna go through there. So the second point is identify the structure. What do I mean with the structure? Well, in this case, I actually, in the picture, I actually draw how I look at the tree. So that green bark that I draw in the tree, that green is everything that I'm looking at the tree when I'm looking at the tree. I am not looking at the little branches that are closing the house. I'm not looking at how crowded the little branches, the red things are at the top. No, I am looking at that green, at the green elements in the tree. So I start from the bottom and I see how every branch develop and how they relate to each other. And that is going to give me an idea where the branch is going, which one is interfering with it, and which one I wanna cut, or I wanna remove, or I wanna keep. So in that case, I go, and at the beginning I am looking at the tree, like see what is being crowded. And that's why I like winter pruning, because you can actually see really clear how every branch develops and where it develops and how it went and how it moved. So when I learn how to identify my branches, then I start looking of, okay, what do I need to solve? So I start looking for anything that is crossing, anything that is competing, or anything that is crowding other branches. So in the right side, I show in blue examples of the 3Cs: crossing, competing, and crowding. It doesn't matter which one is which one, but let's start with the crossing here. For example, it's a branch that started going one section and out of some reason decide to go up. That is going to crowd a lot of your tree. So you want to generate spaces between branches. So that branch that is in blue may just go. Over here in the below the crowding, you have another branch that is going up, that is developing from a branch and then is going down and crowding the branch below. So yes, I want to cut that branch as well. I don't cut, again, I'm not going to cut every single thing, and I am not going to fix everything single thing in my tree. So I start with the dead disease and damage. And if I have more of my budget, if I have not passed my pruning budget, I'm going to keep going and I'm going to look of, okay, what is crossing and what is crossing will be the next in hierarchy. Anything that is crossing means is robbing or is, like making wounds in my tree. So I may want to cut those sooner than later, because when branches are robbing, they make wounds in the tree. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do, for example, here there is the damage. You can see the damage. So we already cut that one for sure. The crowding over here is a branch that is growing up in the lower section, is growing up and growing into the other branch. So I am gonna cut one of those. So I will go like that with the whole. The competing on this drawing here is two branches that I call them parallel. Makes me see it easier when two branches are growing right there at the same point, and they are not going to have a space to develop. So every single branch needs a space to develop the branchlets, the secondary branches. So you want to generate that space. You want to generate space in above and below the branch. So all that spacing helps for the tree to breathe, to develop, to heal. So that is really important. So important in winter pruning that you take your time before you are pruning to look at your tree. I usually say to people, come with your coffee, sit down, and do not prune anything until you finish with your coffee. So this is as much time I want you to take to look at your tree. I do look at every single branch and how they are moving. And I only cut the things that I must cut first. And then if I if I have enough of my budget, I will go with pruning the rest. So in this case, for example, it's a small tree. It was planted 2 years ago. It's finally growing. You can see that it's kind of like finally shooting. My client called me and said, when are you going to prune the maple? And I said, okay. I went to the house. I did one cut. So sometimes I have 25%, but I don't need 25%. The only pruning I did was this branch here that I am showing with this arrow. And it's the branch that is supposed to go out to the back of the tree, but something happened and it came towards the front of the tree, and now is that front section. And I'm like, when I say I was going to cut that, she said, you're going to cut the front of the tree, like a main is a part in the front of the tree. And I say, yes, but this branch, if I leave it, it's going to be crowding everything, because it's going to, remember, it's going to develop branchlets. So that is the one cut I did. I will do it here, right at the bottom, and that is everything I need to cut in this tree. So winter pruning, if I don't have any structural pruning to do, if I don't need to do any thinning, I don't do it. I just do a structural. This is another example of the winter pruning I do. So these are the thinning cuts that I talked at the beginning, and the cutting the buds and making it look natural at the top. So this is the before, where the tree is shooting a lot. This is a mature tree, but it's kind of like in that age that is happy and it's growing, and every year I go and thin it out. Structurally, the tree is already set, so I don't have to do much of the structure, but I'm controlling the height. It is not close to even though this picture looks like it's close to the cables, it's not close to the cables. This tree is 10 feet tall. But I do want it to, what I want to show you in the picture is that this tree is not like I did 10% in one section and I come back next year and I do the other section. That is not a good idea, because you are unbalancing the tree. I always say pruning is a balancing act, and not because I am in the tree, but because what I am doing is I am balancing the tree growth. The tree is stronger in the upper section and weaker in the inside and the lower section. So everything I'm doing is balancing how strong it is in the upper section by reducing, by thinning, by tipping, and so that is another thing I do in winter pruning. So, okay, so let's stop here for right now. And if you guys have any questions, I can answer that.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Wow, so much good information. I learn everything every time I listen to you about these kinds of trees and these kinds of prunes. I really appreciate even like the talks about the different kinds of cuts and like the jump cuts and everything. It actually made a lot more sense than I've ever understood before. I've been answering many of the questions as they're coming in, and thank you everyone for all your good questions. And one that I wanted you to maybe talk about is, could you go over a little bit more of what it means to be walling off, and like what causes the plant to wall off or heel over, or like what does that actually mean?
Oh, okay, so yeah, when you do have a cut, so you have sections. When you do a cut, the walling off is a natural process that happens with the tree. So the trees are layers. So that's why they have, like in these museums, natural museums, you have those tree trunks and say, oh, this is how many years it has. So they grow in layers everywhere, not only in the trunk, but in the branches. So the way that they heal is by producing that layer every year. So that's why they take so long to heal. So when you do a cut, so for example here, you do have a little bit of that dead wood inside, and the donut is starting to happen. So we call it a donut just because sometimes it looks like a donut, but at the beginning, usually it's starting one section. But in this case, if you leave a stub, so then they take longer to wall off that wound that you made. So it's all, the tree does it all. Some people ask me, do you put anything in the wound to protect it? And I say no, because the tree has their own systems to protect themselves from things that happen, unless that is like a big, so it's a big wound in a tree, and I know it's gonna take 20 years for it to heal. Maybe the wound, because of the way that it needed to be, is a little bit in the flooded, it's getting watered on. I protect those, but rather than that, the wounds that I do with my trees in general, they have their own natural system to protect themselves, and I don't put anything on the wounds. I try to do good cuts.
Thank you. Yeah, that was actually my next question too, of your opinions on using pruning sealers and when you would use it or when you wouldn't, and you answered it perfectly right there. And then one other one that I think we could maybe talk about, and I think you might go into with your more in-person demonstration, is how do you actually decide between what is the newest growth, and what's old year growth, and what's 1 year to where you cut to or versus too old? Like, how can you determine that?
Okay, so a lot of the times maple has these markings in the tree, but so for example, I would say in this, you have here, like, this is a 1 year growth. So you see here, a lot of the times you can see it by the color, so it's a little brighter, it's yellow, sorry, is green, is light green, or like really vivid green, or like a vivid brown. For the color, the red maple, the bloodgood is like burgundy color. So that gives you, the color gives you an idea. So in this case, for example, I have this branch and I look, and it's a whole new branch that start right from this point. Sometimes they have markings. I'm trying to look for the markings. But I will say the more lighter the color, I will say with the maples, the easiest one, it will be the color. The more lighter the color, the younger they are. Even the coral bark maples, that are this red one that I select to show you, it gets to be brown with time. So it's hard to, so that's how it is. This is the easiest one to recognize when it's young, when it's old. But I would say by how vivid the branch is, you can see it's last year growth.
Yeah. And I think like how you were saying before, it's the branches grow out from the stems, and if there's a cascading of branches coming from each other, you can know, years by years, versus if it's one line, then usually it's the newest growth or the youngest and the most lightly colored. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I have one more question before I believe you're moving on to one last topic. Someone has a tree that is two main or two main trunks coming out of it, but one has died off almost completely, but they're kind of keeping each other in balance, and they're worried that if they cut one off, would it be imbalanced, or would it be a problem for the tree, or how would you deal with maybe like a two trunks situation that one is dead?
So, well, if it's fully dead, you do have to cut it. I mean, it's not a point to leave a dead section just because it's gonna be balanced. It's already dead, so I will cut it. But if it's half dead, or it's a section that is dead, so then I will say, sometimes just nature. Like, I have a tree that is leaning, and my client is asking me to make it straight. And I told her, like, well, why you just don't try to see the tree, the beauty of the tree as being the leaning tree towards the entry, And so sometimes, yes, in that case, the tree was multi-trunk and end up, losing one of them. It's gonna get unbalanced. The good thing about that is that if the sun, for example, is hitting this way, so then these branches are gonna develop. So a lot of the times, I try to do good cuts in the side of the branch that I want to develop again. So like that, start encouraging growth in that section by stimulating, by cutting a little bit. It kind of like doesn't make sense because you are cutting the part that is already kind of like unbalanced, but it actually stimulates the tree. So sometimes I do 2-3 cuts, see what it does, and if it reacts really well at the top, so then I go and do a little bit more cuts in winter, because winter stimulates nice growth in spring. So yeah,
Wonderful.
that's what I will do.
And then I think leading to your next kind of area, someone was asking the differences between winter pruning versus spring pruning and how you would kind of think about that as you go into the new year.
Okay, yeah, let's keep going. I'm gonna answer that right away. I'm gonna share my screen again. So the next one is a spring pruning. So in this case, so what I do in spring pruning is, again, I always try to read my trees. So the trees started to grow. Don't cut right at the start of the growth, because you're gonna you're gonna make your tree get all bush, like grow as a bush. I let it grow, and I also read my tree. So remember that in spring, you have the strongest growth, and they're gonna shoot out really strong. Dormant trees usually do that, have that really first growth in spring really strong. That also helps me to see how strong my tree is in general. Like in the dry seasons, when we have dry winters, so what happened is I have really small growth in spring. So that told me, okay, my trees are not so happy. They are getting stressed with the dry winters. So what do I do in spring? The the spring pruning, I try to do it between April and May. So I have a really short time window. I go, like I start my spring pruning close to Walnut Creek, places that they get harder earlier, and I finish in San Francisco and Mill Valley, because they are a little bit more, and Berkeley, because they had a little bit of that fog situation there, that humidity there. But I try not to go too much into June in hot climates. So my spring pruning is, again, my 25% in my budget. And what I do is I look at how the cuts I did in winter reacted. I do want to see what I did the cut. I want to see shoots. I want to see more than one shoot for every cut. That tells me my tree is healthy. If I do a cut and I see only one shoot, my tree is in the weaker side. In spring pruning, what I do is I thin out again my top section, because it's the balancing act that I'm doing. So I thin out my top section, and I work in my branch definition. So right there, I'm working in those little thin branches. In winter, I didn't touch these little branches. I went with more of these big ones. In spring, I'm gonna work with those. Those are my branch definition. If my branch is going flat, anything that is going up, I'm gonna cut it. I am gonna make a space between branches, and I'm also reducing a little bit the tree. So in spring, for example, this is what my trees will look like. So in spring, I come, April, May, when they finally shoot out and I cannot see anything in the tree. So then I come and thin it out. And I am thin it out. So here you can see I thin out my 25%. I am not making big holes at the top of the tree, because they are gonna have sun hitting them pretty close to the pruning. So what I am doing is I'm doing an overall thinning out of the tree, and actually like kind of like make it see through without making big holes. Unless that making, other trees, you have to make a space between branches. So that is what I do. That is my spring pruning, mainly is working at the tops, and thinning out the tree. Yeah. And so and I am gonna ask Sloats if I can do a spring pruning seminar for maples, just for that, so you guys can do your follow-up with more details. I decided this season I'm gonna give the details for the pruning you can do this season, but it's an overall. So for the products, I wanna, so the ones that I was mentioning, for example, fertilizing your maples, the best time to fertilize your maples actually is kind of like fall pruning, fall. Spring is a good time if your tree was having issues. Spring and fall are good times. Fall because the tree is getting the nutrients to store in the root system. I don't recommend to fertilize trees all the time, especially not fruit, not maples, because they are actually sensitive to fertilizers that are really strong. So you wanna try to fertilize with things that are for maples. They are kind of like soft. If you have it in a pot, don't fertilize too much. If your pot is showing, for example, if you have like one of those red pots that they don't have glaze, you can actually see all the salts in the outside. Sometimes the leaves are burned because too much fertilizer. So the three fertilizers I put here, I feel that they are really soft for the maples. They do really good. And also all of them has this mycorrhizae, which it helps the plant to get the water from the soil. So yeah, and then the help is one that I use for fall in places where, like, okay, we are in when you fertilize in fall, one of the things that is kind of like tricky is that there is not water, there is no rain, so it's dry. So if you put a dry fertilizer in the soil and you don't water, so the plants are not able to take much of the fertilizer. Some of the nutrients in the fertilizers, they don't move much. Pretty much where it falls, it stays. So if there are no roots there, they are not gonna be taken. Like that is phosphorus is one of them. So the kelp help is one that is really good for root development. So you can put that like in winter, you can put that in fall, and it's really soft, and it has also micronutrients, which is really good. The other products I put here are things that I have seen happening. Like, for example, rats are loving eating after the pandemic. Rats eat the cambium. So if you see the bark being peeled, so protected with this for organic. That is something that you put in the bark of the tree. It totally damage the like not damage, but it, of course, it's gonna put a color. It's a paint. They sell different tints, different colors of brown and stuff, but it's a paint. It doesn't look good, but if the rats are eating the bark or sunburn are affecting the bark, it's better to protect the bark. So usually I do that like in fall for rats, or early in the spring for sunburn. I protect that bark so it doesn't get sunburn. Daffodils are good for golfers, so you can put daffodils around if you see that your trees are, the root system or your trees are getting eaten. Golfers for some reason don't like daffodils, so you have golfer baskets for your trees as well. I would say I do plant most of my maples in golfer baskets for sure. and I did had a lot of white flies last year for some reason. White flies and aphids in maples. So remember that maples, they don't like to be sprayed in the leaves they get burned really easily no matter what you put. So I try to do for the white flies is these little white things in the leaves. I try to actually spray it with water, really strong water in the leaves. And then I will pick up, I do my mechanical cleaning, which is I will pick up every leaf that has thrips out of the ground and put a mulch to keep those strips under. And when you put mulch, you want to put like a good 2-3 inches of mulch around the tree if you have thrips. Thrips is those little brown. When it's really infested, it looks like silver at the bottom and at the top of the leaf. I saw that last year, pretty dominant, those two. So just want to let you know that don't spray anything in the leaves because it will get burned, but you have to do mechanical cleaning. So yeah, that is it. So you guys have any questions about the rest of the?
Yay. Awesome. Yeah, just a little bit more. We can kind of finish it out with a few little questions. But I have someone actually talking about they have a really old, like large 30-foot Japanese maple that is near their house foundation. And they're just wondering, do you know if the Japanese maples have pretty extensive root systems? Are they more damaging or they can be harmful to concretes and things like that?
Yeah, I do have few situations where the maples were affecting the foundations of the house, and they do go through little cracks and they go their way through. So you have to be mindful of that. A lot of the times, just I had done, for example, just cutting one of the roots at the time. So if it's too big, maybe no, but if it's like a thumb thick, I will just cut it with the shovel and let it be and put some of that hemp help fertilizer for it to develop roots closer to the part I cut. So if I cut here, so then I put it right there and they will develop. It's kind of like a branch. You cut and they will grow. So I would not cut all of them at once, but I had done that when I had to, they're gonna do something, a pipe or change the fence or something like that. They called me with anticipation and I cut some of them. Sometimes the one thing about cutting too much of the root system in one section is that, the root system is to hold the tree. So if you are trying to cut all that root system, it can become a problem. Also, the other way to handle that is change your watering. Because remember, root systems look for the water. If you are having your tree too close to the foundation, a lot of the times I say, let's just put water in this section only. So the root system is going to go to the other side.
Nice. Wonderful. I also have some questions about, do you have a particular type of mulch that you tend to use for Japanese maples or in general? Someone's asking about cedar, or do you like fir or other kinds of mulches?
Oh, yeah, no, the only thing I select mulch, my selection of mulch is, I try not to use that black color mulch, because I don't think that is really good for the soil itself. I try to go with the natural colors, nothing that is painted with anything. And also, like if there is one like in the hillsides, I try to use that is the monkey hair is called, that is kind of like more hairy, like redwood type of thing. I use it for the hills. I try to not put anything around the trunk for mulch. So if the trunk is there, I try to put the mulch maybe even 6 inches away from the trunks. But in general, no, in general, it's kind of like what type of look do you want in your house. And you don't want to put your mulch next to the trees. Rather than that, those are my suggestions.
Nice. And then just some more little maintenance and understanding of what's some good tips. Do you have any regimen for cleaning your pruning tools or worried about transferring diseases or anything like that? Do you have a method?
Yeah, I clean my tools every time I go to a client. I clean my tools every time I move from a tree to a tree, depending on the garden. But I do use Lysol. So my pruning, and also remember that when you have your pruning shears clean, it's just easier for you to do your cuts. So I have my, like you can see my shears have been like sharpening every time I start my day. I sharpen my shears. They don't look like machine sharpen it, just me sharpening them. That is really important. So I do Lysol, and if I am pruning, for example, from fruit trees, like plums and stuff like that, they already have diseases. To a maple, I also put a little bit of alcohol. So I want my shears to be fully clean, no sap on them, no sap on the cut or in the pressure point. This is the pressure point, so you don't see no sap in there. So I clean my tools, and if it's a saw, I also go and clean them with a little brush in between the teeth, so no sap or no pieces of wood are staying there from tree to tree. Because I do have to say that maples, they are susceptible to only one disease, but you can move diseases around. So I just do it as a peace of mind. Um, and yeah, but I think that also clean tools helps you for better pruning cuts, because if your shears are full with sap, it gets more sticky, so you are forcing more your shears to cut.